This is John Kiriakou, a retired American spy. His 14-year career as a CIA officer was impressive by any measure. The agency deployed Kiriakou all over the world. In Pakistan, a year after the 9/11 attacks, he led an operation to capture a high-level al-Qaeda official known as Abu Zubaydah. The CIA's treatment of Zubaydah and other detainees would eventually lead to Kiriakou's falling out with the agency. Zubaydah was the first person to be subjected to the CIA's so-called enhanced interrogation techniques. The US government would later acknowledge the practice was torture.
In the immediate aftermath of 9/11, we did some things that were wrong. We did a whole lot of things that were right, but we tortured some folks.
The torture is depicted in a series of sketches by Abu Zubaydah. Detainees were subjected to physical attacks. They were put in various painful stress positions for long periods of time. Waterboarding was a common practice that involves choking a victim by filling their throat with a steady stream of water, making them feel as if they're drowning in slow motion. Journalists had long sought official admission that these practices were taking place. It wasn't until John Kiriakou's 2007 interview with an ABC News reporter that Washington's open secret about government-sanctioned torture was finally confirmed.
If the American public was to see somebody, even Abu Zubaydah, being waterboarded, what would you guess?
I think it would be objectionable. It's sort of a violent thing to see or to go through.
Kiriakou, who had retired nearly 4 years earlier, had become the first CIA official to confirm that the agency used torture. The personal consequences for him since have been enormous. After the interview, Kiriakou lost his lucrative corporate job and became the subject of a lengthy FBI investigation. In 2012, he was charged with multiple counts of revealing classified information to journalists. He faced the possibility of 35 years in jail. As part of a deal with prosecutors, Kiriakou pled guilty to a single count and was sentenced to 30 months in federal prison. 8 years after being released, he maintains the case against him was political, and that his decision to speak out will forever be on the right side of history. Basil Rahan, The InnerView.
Only one person ended up doing any prison time over the CIA's torture program. And here's the rub. It was not a torturer. It was the man from the CIA who ended up exposing the program and confirming that the orders came from the very top. I'm delighted to tell you that he's joined us today on The InnerView. John Kiriakou joins us now. Really good to have you on the program, John. It's been quite a ride for you over the past couple of decades. Are you comfortable with the term whistleblower? When people Google you and they think about you, you're the CIA whistleblower guy.
It actually took me a long time to get to that point. In the beginning, I never called myself a whistleblower. I didn't think that I was a whistleblower. I was just a normal person who saw an illegality and went public with it. It was my attorneys who had to finally convince me that I was a whistleblower.
When you did that interview in 2007, while you were sitting there and revealing what you had revealed, saying that yes, waterboarding was policy, yes, it came from the top, yes, this is what we did in the so-called war on terror. At that moment in time, did you think, my life is going to change now? I'm going to end up in jail? Or was it somewhat nonchalant? Was it only the overreaction of the CIA and the FBI and everybody else which then made it dawn on you that this could be big and you could be in big trouble?
I really didn't think that I had done anything wrong. In fact, my wife went with me that day to ABC News and sat just off camera. And when I finished the interview, I said, "How did I do?" She said, "Great." I said, "I didn't say anything classified, did I?" She said, "No, you did great." I had no idea that it was going to be a major international story that it became in the next day or so. And in fact, the CIA reported me to the FBI the very next day for having committed the crime of revealing classified information. The FBI investigated me for a full year, from December of 2007 until December of 2008, and then elected to not charge me with a crime. They said that the information was the worst kept secret in Washington and that I would not be charged with a crime.
What they eventually came after you with, or what had eventually stuck when you had the plea deal, was that you had disclosed an undercover CIA operative's name to a journalist. So it wasn't about whistleblowing in terms of torture and all of that, even though we know that that's the reason why they were alerted to you being a possible threat. When you made that deal, tell me a little bit about the thought process and how it felt.
Right. That's something that I think about all the time, something that I'll never forget. You know, I thought these charges against me were so ridiculous. I was charged with, finally, I was charged with 3 counts of espionage. And of course, I hadn't committed espionage. But I was also charged, as you note, with revealing the identity of an undercover CIA operative. That identity was never made public. And at the same time that I was being charged, General David Petraeus, the director of the FBI, was revealing the identities of 10 CIA covert operatives to his girlfriend. And I said to my attorneys at the time, why isn't he being charged with crime? And my attorney, my lead attorney, said because he didn't blow the whistle on the CIA's torture program. So in the end, I actually decided to go to trial. I actually decided that I hadn't done anything wrong. And I said, once I get in front of a jury, they'll see how ridiculous these charges are. And my lead attorney was very angry with this decision. And he got right in my face and he said, do you know what your problem is? Your problem is you think this is about justice. And it's not about justice. It's about mitigating damage. Take the deal.
And
So
you spent 2 years, right? You spent, you spent 2 years instead of 35 or 45, and you're spending time with your kids now, right? So ultimately, was it the correct decision?
Yes, and it was my kids that motivated me to finally take the deal, because you're right. It was 23 months or 45 years.
What was it like in federal prison?
Well, you know, the judge recommended that I go to a minimum security work camp. No bars on the windows, no fences, no guard towers. And they ignored that recommendation, and they put me in the actual prison with child sex criminals, with mafia leaders, with international drug kingpins. And I decided that I was trained for this kind of thing. I was going to rely on my CIA training to keep myself safe. And at the top of the social heap, I made strategic alliances with different gangs or groups in prison. And I ended up getting through the 23 months.
Incredible. I think we can do an entirely different interview just talking about your time in prison, and maybe we'll do that someday, which sounds really fascinating. There's a lot of potential there. I wonder,
that would be fun.
After all of this, right? After all is said and done, you blew the whistle. You said, well, they were lying about the fact that they didn't know about waterboarding and some of those other processes that they called enhanced interrogation techniques. It came out.
Correct.
You paid a heavy price for it. When you reflect back on this entire journey, do you think that all of it was rotten, or was it only the fact that the CIA was crossing the line on certain instances? So, for example, you were the counterterrorism chief in Pakistan immediately after 9/11, a very explosive time in the world, right? The United States, desperate for revenge, a lot of anger among the Bush administration, and the US really flexing its superpower muscle. From the stuff that you did, going after Al-Qaeda, going after suspected terrorists, was all of it wrong? Or was it just the fact that you crossed the line when it came to the specifics of how you tried to extract information out of detainees?
That's a great question, actually. I do not think all of it is wrong. I believe that our immediate response after 9/11 was a righteous war. We had to destroy Al-Qaeda because it had sought to destroy us. Now, Iraq was wrong. It was wrong to stay in Afghanistan for 20 years, certainly. But the torture issue, the torture program, to me, was very wrong. We like to go around the world. We Americans like to go around the world and profess to be a country that is governed by the rule of law, a country that is a guiding light, a beacon of hope for human rights and civil liberty. And that's just simply not true. You know, on the one hand, we tell countries what they can and can't do when it comes to civil rights. And then we run a torture program. We run an archipelago of secret prisons. We kidnap people off the streets and send them to third countries to be tortured. We're either going to be that shining beacon of hope or we're not. But we can't have it both ways.
In looking into the details of your time in Pakistan, you were central to the capture of Abu Zubaydah, and he ended up being waterboarded 83 times, and he was in all sorts of terrible stress positions, sleep deprivation, food deprivation, and the like. You were there with him at the beginning, but you weren't involved in his torture, which seems abundantly clear. However, interestingly, from the testimony that came out of Abu Zubaydah, US government officials, White House officials, DOD officials, and the like, used his testimony to build a case for the Iraq war, making that connection between Saddam Hussein and Al-Qaeda and saying, well, we've got to go into Iraq. So when you think back, do you feel a sense of almost personal responsibility that you nabbed this guy and they instrumentalized him and used him to build their case to invade Iraq?
In part, this is a very complicated issue in that there were parallel sources of intelligence. There was the intelligence being provided by Ahmed Chalabi and the Iraqi National Congress that those of us at the CIA knew was being fabricated. But even though it was being fabricated and we were telling the White House that it was false, the office of the vice president, Dick Cheney at the time, elected to use that phony information to justify the Iraq war. One of the ways that Abu Zubaydah was very, very helpful to us, well, two of the ways, were that we really didn't know anything about Al-Qaeda's wiring diagram. We didn't know anything about its structure. And he's the one who told us how the organization was structured. More importantly, he told us about Khalid Sheikh Mohammed. And we had never heard the name Khalid Sheikh Mohammed before. We had heard the nom de guerre Mukhtar. We knew that there was this very bad man out there, Mukhtar, who meant us harm and who was trying to come up with these different plans to use planes as weapons. But we had never heard the name Khalid Sheikh Mohammed. And so it was Abu Zubaydah that allowed us to focus our investigation. Now, with all of that said, I'm on record as saying that I believe Abu Zubaydah should be released from Guantanamo. He has been in our custody for almost 21 years now, and he's never been charged with a crime. He never will be charged with a crime because the information used to implicate him in crimes was gathered using torture, and it's just simply illegal. So if we can't give this man his constitutional rights of a trial before a jury of his peers, we have to let him go.
As things moved forward and the debate kicked on in the US, in large part due to you and others who were very bravely coming forward and saying this is what's happening. We saw in 2015 the McCain-Feinstein resolution in the Senate, and the government taking it seriously that torture is happening and that we need to have new rules and we shouldn't be doing the things that we were doing in the immediate aftermath of the war on terror. Does that mean that the CIA is no longer torturing people?
Well, that's what we would all like to think. And I hope that's the case. I hope the CIA is not torturing people. But with that said, you make a very important point here. The new rules are that the CIA and every other national security organization in the United States have to abide by the rules set forth in the Army Field Manual. Now, the Army Field Manual is an executive branch document. And so all that the American government needs to do to bring back a torture program is, with the stroke of the president's pen, change the Army Field Manual. So as things stand now, we're told that there is no torture program. I would like to believe that that's true. And I would also like to believe that that is a permanent situation. But we just don't really know.
I began by asking you if you're comfortable with the label whistleblower. let me ask you about the other label that did the rounds, particularly just after the government started going after you. Traitor. How did that feel?
I think that the traitors that we had in government were sitting in the White House. We are supposed to be, as I said, a nation of laws. We can't just pick and choose the laws that we want to follow and ignore the laws that we don't want to follow. If there were any traitors in government at the time, it was the leadership at the CIA, it was the president and the vice president, and the national security advisor. I would put my record up against theirs any day.
Does it matter if the president is left-wing or right-wing, Democrat or Republican? Whether the House or Congress is, one side or the other. When it comes to foreign policy, when it comes to the CIA, and when it comes to the things that the government is willing to do or the places that they're willing to go in order to take care of national security?
No, this is not a partisan issue at all. We've had Democratic presidents and Republican presidents pursuing the same kinds of policies. Barack Obama, for example, who was supposed to have been a left-wing president, killed 4 times as many people as George W. Bush did with the use of drones. So this has nothing to do with the domestic U.S. politics or whether somebody identifies as a liberal or as a conservative. They're all in this together. This is a unified. Unfortunately, it's a unified policy.
As things stand right now, with Russia's attack on Ukraine, with war raging in that particular region, and with myriad other things going on, tell me, knowing how the CIA operates, what would they be doing right now? What would their priorities be, given that the United States is not actively involved in any specific wars on the ground? They don't have ground troops right now. Tell me what's going on in the corridors of power in Langley.
I would say 2 things are going on. One is training Ukrainians in any way possible. Certainly there's Defense Department training. We know that they're being trained on HIMARS and on the use of the Abrams tank now and on the Patriot missile system. But at the CIA, they're doing 2 things. They're training Ukrainian intelligence officers to, very simply, to recruit spies to steal secrets. And they are trying the best that they can to infiltrate Russian organizations, again, to steal spies, to recruit spies to steal secrets. That's really what the CIA comes down to.
You have been on record as saying that you recruited, I'm not sure if you said a handful of people or 9 people. You can verify the number now. During your time at the CIA, tell me a little bit, I mean, without going to jail again, I don't want to get you in trouble, but tell me a little bit about the recruitment processes and what those types of people would be doing right now out there. They might be keeping you in mind as well, because you were the guy that got them in.
Yeah, that's a tough one. At the CIA, we have something called the asset recruitment cycle. It is spot, assess, develop, recruit. You spot somebody, whether it's at a diplomatic cocktail party or on the street or in a meeting. You assess their access to information that you want. You develop them by befriending them and making sure that you become one of their best friends. And then you formalize the relationship by recruiting them. This is something that the CIA has been doing since 1947, and it works. And so they just keep doing it. It's updated constantly because of changes in technology, of course, and changes in the CIA's operating directives. But this is what they would be doing against the Russians right now.
Were you proud of your work in general over the years?
Oh, I was. I was very proud of my work. It's funny. For all the complaints that I have about the CIA, those complaints are really about legality and about maintaining the rule of law. But in terms of enjoying the job, I enjoyed every minute of it. CIA sent me to 70 countries around the world. I got to meet kings and presidents and prime ministers, and it was the job of a lifetime. I just wish that they had followed the law like they were supposed to have followed the law.
Does it sting that you're still, in a legal sense, a convicted felon? You're free, but you're a convicted felon. And of course, there are a lot of other aspects that come with it. Tangibly, it affects your life. You cannot vote and the like. Do you want to get that monkey off your back?
I do. I applied to have my civil rights reinstated, so I am allowed to vote now. But when I was convicted, the government confiscated my pension. And as a result, if I don't get that pension back, I'm going to have to work until the day I die. I have literally nothing saved for my retirement now. And so, you know, I've got a lot of support here in Washington. A lot of former CIA officers, 70 of them, signed a letter to the president asking him to pardon me. And so I'm going to apply for a presidential pardon and, as you correctly say, try to get this monkey off my back.
Do you think that Joe Biden would be amenable to that? Do you think if ever there was an opportunity, he'd be the guy who might be able to do it?
I think so. As you might have guessed from my name, I'm a Greek American. And Joe Biden has a reputation in the Greek American community as being so pro-Greek American that he's called Joe Bidenapolis. And so I'm hoping that, you know, maybe I can make a little connection there and he'll take some pity on me.
Yeah, well, something very deep into my research. I was watching some of your interviews, reading a bunch of articles. Something that I just came across in the last half hour before I had to come in studio and talk to you was this information that you were the victim of I guess something that can be described as a bit of a shakedown by some Trump officials, where there was the suggestion that Trump might pardon you, but you needed to pay some money in 2 installments, and you paid the first installment, but the pardon never came. I mean, it was so crazy that I thought, oh my God, I want to actually delay this interview so I can read up some more on it before I do the interview. But you know what, just tell us about it because it's insane. Tell me more about this, John.
Yeah, this unfortunately is how Washington works. At least under the Trump administration, pardons were literally for sale. And so I hired a Republican lobbyist. She asked for $50,000 up front, another $50,000 to come once I got the pardon. And she was supposed to lobby the president on my behalf and eventually get me the pardon. I never got the pardon. And toward the very end of the Trump administration, when I realized I wasn't going to get it, I secured a meeting with Rudolph Giuliani, the former mayor of New York, the close friend and attorney of the president. And right to my face, Giuliani asked me for $2 million. And I laughed and I said, first of all, I don't have $2 million. I'll never have $2 million. But secondly, even if I had $2 million, why would I spend that to recover a $700,000 pension? And it turned out that the FBI at the time of that meeting was investigating Giuliani for doing exactly this, trying to sell pardons. And so I spoke to the FBI, I answered their questions. To the best of my knowledge, nothing has come of it or will come of it, and I never got my pardon.
It's completely bonkers. It's an absolutely ludicrous situation, and it's another one. We'll have another show about that someday. Okay, before we wrap up, there are a few names I'm going to throw at you, and very briefly give me your thoughts on them, right? So I'm going to start with Edward Snowden.
I think Edward Snowden is a bona fide American hero. Without Edward Snowden, we would have no idea that our country's intelligence agencies were spying on us. I think he did a great national service.
Julian Assange.
I'm a strong supporter of Julian Assange. Julian Assange embarrassed the American government, but again, just like Snowden, without Julian Assange, we wouldn't know about war crimes being committed by the U.S. military, and we wouldn't know about the CIA's capabilities in targeting citizens.
Chelsea Manning?
I have a little bit of a tougher time with Chelsea Manning.
Why?
I know that for whistleblowers, motivation is irrelevant. But Chelsea Manning didn't provide the information that she provided to WikiLeaks because she intended to blow the whistle. She did it because she just didn't want to be in the American military anymore, and she wanted to come home. And this is why Chelsea Manning is not really a participant in whistleblower circles. You know, there are whistleblower groups. I'm looking out the window of my office right now, and I can see 2 different whistleblower groups across the street. And Chelsea Manning doesn't play a role in any of those whistleblower groups. She's elected to just stay away and lead her own life.
Very finally, the thing that I said at the top, the people who were involved in torture didn't see any prison time. The whistleblower, you went to jail. You lost your freedom for 2 years. You suffered in many ways as a result of it. From the perspective of power, that's deterrence, isn't it? It's a lesson. If anybody wants to blow the whistle,
oh, yes,
you're going to have to pay the price. With that in mind, your message to anyone within the CIA right now or any other arm of government, in any government, not just the United States, if they want to blow the whistle on something that is troubling their conscience, your message to them is what?
Hire an attorney first. You can blow the whistle. You should blow the whistle. But have an attorney sitting next to you when you do it.
Okay. John Kiriakou.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed this conversation. I thank you very much for joining us.
As did I.